Take the conversation further now. See a report titled State of Lagos Housing Markets there, produced by Roland Igbinoba Real Foundation there. That's showed quite a lot about what's happening with Lagos real estate there, showing that the housing deficit has surged by 15% from around 2.95 million units in 2016 to roughly 3.4 million units today, emphasizing the growing gap in supply despite both public and private interventions there. So we see that drop there, about or addition there, the growth, that's for the deficit, big 15% move there from 2016 to 2025. Well, joining us to unpack this report now, we have Dr. Roland Igbinoba as the President, PropTech Nigeria, and Executive Vice Chair, Roland Igbinoba Real Foundation for Housing and Urban Development, joining from Abuja studio. Great to have you. Good morning.
Morning, Laddie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. And definitely, I know some people watching us right now might be property searching. Right now, we know how grueling, that can be when you don't have a very big budget. And your report is showing that the deficit there has grown by 15% in Lagos. Talk to us about this.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been some time where we have tracked house prices via the Roland Igbinoba house price indices. And what has happened over the last 10 years is that you've seen, just like you mentioned, you've seen the deficit grow from 2.95 to 3.4 million today. And there are several factors why this has happened. A typical example, I'll tell you today, we found out from the report that home ownership in Lagos City is at 23% today, okay? In 2016, that figure was 15%, so there is an increase in home ownership, if you look at it from the home ownership perspective. But what is interesting is that 40% of the homes are owned by investors, okay? So you see investment in luxury areas, and so that's making the deficit grow. Now, another interesting thing is that Lagos receives about 600 or in excess of 600,000 people coming into Lagos. And what that does is that even though there are new homes being built, because of the influx of people coming into Lagos, you see this deficit growing. Another thing that is also responsible for this deficit is the speed to market. So, for example, if you look at the time that it takes to process housing permits, okay, it means that there is cost, and also the time it takes developers to come to market then also takes a long time. And so that's been what's been responsible in terms of the deficit. I mean, there are issues that we already know. There are issues of building materials. There are issues of infrastructure. But the key points that I would say here is that a lot of the investment in housing are made by investors, and that kind of increases that deficit in that space. Ladi.
About supply increasing, but deficit is also rising. How much of the new housing is luxury versus affordable?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question, because what you find is that while a lot of developments are happening in the luxury segment, you find out that in the low income segment there is undersupply. Okay, because people are focusing on where they will get people to buy and where they will get investors. And again, there are also several reasons for all of this. You know that, I mean, with the current state of the Naira, it means that diaspora remittances can play a lot of factor in this, where you find that there are a lot of investments going towards premium areas, not necessarily luxury, but going towards premium areas than the affordable housing play. And this can really become a problem. And that's why you see sort of there are new builds coming up, but the deficit still tends to be on the rise, Ladi.
Right, and how much of this is due to population pressure there? Because definitely as population increases, there's more demand, for housing units. How's the gap there between population rise and the supply of units?
I mean, urbanization is always a challenge, if you know what I mean. So, again, the example that we gave, okay, if you look at the influx of people coming into Lagos, for example, and you can count that as the population. At the time we did the report in 2016, Lagos was, I think it was around maybe 17, 18 million at that time. And today, Lagos is 24 million. So that tells you why you also find that kind of deficit, because I'll tell you something that's very interesting that we found in the report. Now, when you talk about affordable housing, you are looking at how affordable is it for people to own their homes. Now, in Lagos, less than 5%, okay, of houses are priced under 15 million. So that just tells you the enormity of the challenge that we are facing. And if you have that, it means that looking at earnings where you have a lot of people earning between 100 to 200,000 naira, if you do the math, it then becomes very difficult, especially in a market where the mortgage reforms are just evolving. So it becomes very difficult for people to own their own homes.
And also, we've seen that Airbnb-style investments there. That seems to be, gaining a lot of ground now. And, on the back of the dirty December, we know most of those apartments were in high demand. So, looking at, investment now, how do the luxury shortlets, how does that affect, housing availability?
So very, very interesting. So here now you're talking about residency and talking about how people are doing investment, right? And that's also a reason for housing deficit. Now, if you look at, like you rightly mentioned, dirty December, people are already now planning even investment in the dirty December in terms of shortlet. And what typically happens, like I mentioned earlier, 40% of these homes that are built are by investors. So what happens is you find out that people are investing because the yields, okay, in shortlets and Airbnb types are higher. So in Lagos, for example, if you look at the luxury areas in Ikoyi, Banana Island, yields are around somewhere around, very good is around 6.5%, 6%, anyway, between 6 to 7.5%, right? But when it comes to shortlet, you could command yields as high as between 15 to 18%. And capital flows where it is best, where it will return best for investors. And so if rather than investing in a long-term rental property that yields an average of around 6.5%, why won't I do a shortlet where I know that I can get between 15 to 80%? And so that's what you're seeing in the market in terms of the shortlet space. And a lot of the premium areas, this is happening. And again, this is another factor for the deficit that Lagos is experiencing today in terms of rental stock and home ownership.
Right. So with the report so far, it seems the investors are there in the market, for the money. Government is not able to, provide the, affordable housing, that most people need at this point. So who's going to save us?
No. You must understand that, like I said, government, there are a lot of activities happening within the government space. Okay, and that is where regulation comes in. And when you talk about regulation are on both sides. So, for example, government is helping with digitalizing land. There are a lot of work going on at the EGIS. And once all of that crystallizes, what it means is that costs will drop. Now, government is also doing a cross-subsidy mechanism where they're saying to developers, so if we give you a parcel of land, you should be able to build 10 to 20% of that land for affordable housing. Okay, but again, investors will put money where they can't earn their yield or return. But in terms of government, I think all of the work in terms of the infrastructure that helps developers is happening. It just haven't come to fore yet, and that's what's happening within the space. And in terms of regulation is a very interesting thing. You would have noticed recently the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authority came out very strong-willed in terms of regulating all of the agency practices in the state. And beyond that, what's also happening is that by the time there is transparency in the sector, and that's what regulation is bringing to to the state. By the time there is transparency and transactions are in the fore of the government, then I think all of these issues around people just focusing on the luxury end or just focusing on the short-let sector would then abate a bit, and then that can help in terms of affordable housing. And you know that, Ladi, if you look at housing, right, housing is the most expensive asset, as they say, that an individual may have in their lifetime. And what happens is you also need to look at the earnings. If you look at the income demographics, okay, it's just almost impossible. So, for example, I mean, you can't do affordable housing without affordable land. And if you look at Lagos, for example, tell me, where would you find affordable land in Lagos? And so it's a mix of several variables that need to happen to be able to come to a place where you can have affordable housing in Lagos. And that's why the mechanism of the cross-subsidy that the state is engaging in is helping. But again, that's not, it is not closing the deficit gap. And that's why we have had a 15% increase between 2016 till date.
Because it seems that, at this point, to get a good area, good property for around 1 million naira seems impossible, at this point. That was,
what do you mean, Laddie? 1 million naira for?
That's for rent,
1 million naira for rent?
Yeah, for rent. You could rent an apartment, a nice apartment, not so long ago, for about 1 million, and that was supposed to be some, like, high-end. But now you have to cough out like 6 million naira, to get a good property. So you've mentioned affordability, how can you get affordable rates when the land is not affordable? So what other funding alternatives are there, at this point? I hear there's crowdfunding. How does all of that work?
Oh, okay. Interestingly, yeah, crowdfunding is a very innovative alternative financing mechanism. I mean, I'm also, as you know, I'm also vested in a crowdfunding platform called PropCrowdy. And basically what this does is it helps to pool money together. And the good thing with that is SEC licensed crowdfunding business, and so there's regulation for crowdfunding now. And so what we've seen in the space, working with crowdfunding, especially at PropCrowdy, is to see that people are now looking for outlets to put their money. And so that's helping also developers construction, where developers are now able to pull money together to do development in small bites anyway. I mean, this hasn't gotten to a large scale, but as you know, every sector, every market would evolve, just as we have seen in the non-interest finance, that has now evolved and I would say emerging in Nigeria. And so crowdfunding is on that path. The good thing with crowdfunding, though, is that it not only funds developer and helps reduce that cost for development, it also opens up investment opportunities for people who would not be able to do investment ordinarily. So, for example, with a 50,000 naira, with 20,000 naira, you can get on the investment ladder with crowdfunding. And so we're seeing that space. We're seeing a lot of actors coming into that space. Today we have about 5 licensed crowdfunding platforms in Nigeria. And so we think it's something that's going to help within the real estate market. Because if you look at other clients, okay, crowdfunding is a top alternative investment finance and funding mechanism.
All right, definitely I'll be looking out for your next report. Hopefully that gap there, that deficit will close more so that Nigerians can get affordable housing and, we can have more landlords, at this point. Thank you so much. Dr. Roland Igbinoba is the founder, PropCrowdy Limited, and Executive Vice Chair, Roland Igbinoba Real Foundation for Housing and Urban Development. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Laddie. Yeah, thank you.